Hi, it's Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. Welcome to Why America? I'm Leeja Miller. Today we're talking about Saudi Arabian Crown Prince 𝗓𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗪 bin visit to the United States. I don't often cover these types of visits because it's mostly a lot of fanfare and not much concrete comes from it, but this one is different and gives me pause because I think his visit highlights a lot of fucked up shit happening with the Trump regime and globally in a way that needs to be called out and examined. From abuses against journalists to looking the other way on severe human rights abuses in the name of accumulating more wealth, Saudi Arabia and its de facto ruler 𝗓𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗪 bin have become normalized on the global scene and in the United States in a way that is indicative of a larger propensity for the rich and powerful of the world to put the rest of us aside anytime there is money to be made. Thank you to my partner on today's video, PDS Debt. Credit card debt sucks. I have struggled with it. I know how stressful and overwhelming it can feel to watch those debts pile up. And it's so hard to live your life under the constant strain of worrying about credit card debt on top of, literally everything else going on right now. And of course, it's the credit card companies that win when you have to keep paying them huge amounts of interest every month. And it can feel so good to finally take back control of your life by tackling those big scary debts, especially if you can get a little help along the way. If you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, collections, or medical bills, you need to check out PDS Debt. PDS Debt provides a service to match you with debt solutions tailored to your financial situation, and they have a team of people ready to help you with your debt journey. They understand your specific scenario and will help provide alternative solutions to becoming debt-free. PDS Debt is offering a free debt analysis. It only takes 30 seconds. Head over to pdsdebt.com/Miller to get your free debt assessment today. You'll receive a full breakdown on how to save on interest each month and the quickest way to take care of your debt. There's no minimum credit score required. Whether your credit is bad or fair, they're here to help you save more, pay off your debt faster, and start putting money back where it belongs in your savings account. PDS Debt is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, boasts hundreds of 5-star reviews on Google, and holds a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. And getting started is easy. Go to pdsdebt.com/Miller to complete your free debt assessment in just 30 seconds to see what options are available to you. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/Miller. Thanks, PDS Debt. Okay, so let's back up. Here's what happened over the last couple days to get us here. Yesterday, Tuesday, Saudi Arabia's crown prince and de facto leader, 𝗓𝗪𝗧𝗛𝗪𝗓, also known as MBS, arrived in Washington to much fanfare. Trump and MBS sat down for talks that ranged from national security to nuclear energy to F-35 fighter jets. Together, the two leaders signed a defense pact, including the potential sale of up to nearly 50 F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the F-35 fighter jet, touts it as the most advanced fighter jet in the world. The jets are designed to avoid detection and can be used for stealth attacks against enemy forces on their own soil. Each jet costs $80 to $110 million each, according to reporting from 𝗗𝗓𝗏. Lots of countries have them. The US, of course, has the most of them, owning over 2,000 of them. Other countries in the EU, plus the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan, Singapore, and Israel also have a few. And Saudi Arabia wants in on the action. The reason Saudi Arabia hasn't gotten them in the past is because of various diplomatic concerns, especially regarding Israel. The US and Israel have an understanding, officially called the Qualitative Military Edge policy, wherein Israel should always have more firepower than any of its neighbors in the Middle East. Israel has 75 of these F-35s, so a sale of 48 to Saudi Arabia technically wouldn't overpower Israel's feat, but it is a major consideration, especially given the fact that Saudi Arabia has refused to sign on to the Abraham Accords, created during Trump's first term, which would normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. MBS refused to sign the accords unless the US made promises about Saudi security and agreed to help it develop a nuclear program for civilian needs, which Trump refused to do during his first term. So instead, MBS looked elsewhere, turning to longtime enemy Iran, restoring ties with the country in 2023 with the help of China, essentially playing the power dynamics between China and the US off each other. Okay, so you won't help me, US, so I'm going to turn to your powerful rival China for help instead. Iran and China are allies, and now that Saudi Arabia has reconnected with Iran, that's pissed off Israel, who also hates Iran. And since Israel has immense sway over U.S. policy in the Middle East, that creates quite a little quagmire for the U.S. to navigate, which is why, despite Biden's promises to treat Saudi Arabia like a pariah, Biden, as president, made an about-face and visited Saudi Arabia in 2022. This was claimed to be to normalize relations between Israel and the rest of the Middle East. But with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and growing sanctions against Russia for its hostile acts, the U.S. desperately needed to find alternative energy to replace the energy produced by Russia and avoid excessive inflation on gas and oil prices. Biden also declared that the U.S. would not walk away from the Middle East region because of fears that the power vacuum left over would be filled by China, Russia, or Iran. And then, of course, there's the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was a close advisor to the Saudi royal family and the Saudi government for decades. After falling out of favor, he fled Saudi Arabia for the United States in 2017, where he wrote a monthly column in the Washington Post criticizing Saudi Arabia and MBS directly. In 2018, Khashoggi traveled to Turkey and visited the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to obtain divorce documents from the Saudi government that would allow him to move forward with marrying his Turkish fiancée. He first visited the consulate on September 28th and was told to come back at another time to get his documents. On October 2nd, he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and never left. It was later revealed that Saudi operatives inside the consulate tortured, murdered, and dismembered Khashoggi. A UN investigation found that Khashoggi's murder was, quote, an extrajudicial killing for which the state of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is responsible. And a U.S. intelligence investigation found that the entire murder plot may have been ordered by MBS himself, something MBS has vehemently denied. When asked about the murder on Tuesday, Trump told a reporter not to ask such an insulting question and said that Khashoggi was pretty controversial, implying perhaps that it was okay for him to have been murdered. MBS took a more somber tone, saying that they have made changes in his government to ensure nothing like that ever happens again, whatever that means. And the murder of a journalist, critical of the state of Saudi Arabia, appears to be par for the course for human rights abuses in the country. Obviously, a deep dive into the social and political history of Saudi Arabia is beyond the scope of this episode and of my expertise, but if you want to do a deep dive, I might suggest checking out America's Kingdom, Myth-Making on the Saudi Oil Frontier by Robert Vitalis, or Blood and Oil, 𝗓𝗪d bin Salman's Ruthless Quest for Global Power by Bradley Hope and Justin Sheck. And for a look more at the social aspects of Saudi Arabia, there's Girls of Riyadh by Raja Al Sanea. And of course, I welcome other recommendations in the comments. But suffice it to say, Saudi Arabia's human rights abuses are well known and well documented, though of course many fall through the cracks, as is the case anytime a large power commits atrocities against its own people. It ranks second among countries with the highest use of the death penalty as a form of judicial punishment. Not many countries still do that, as most consider it to be outdated and barbaric, but Saudi Arabia seems to use it with abandon, including to punish members of the LGBTQ+ community. Women's freedom of movement is severely curtailed. MBS has been touted as a leader that is modernizing Saudi Arabia because he allows women to drive there, but his willingness to allow certain freedoms is mainly meant to improve his and Saudi Arabia's reputation abroad and does not represent the full picture of gender discrimination in the country, which is still rampant and violent. Due process is frequently ignored, and torture is commonly used during detention. Free speech is severely curtailed, not only for women, but also for journalists and activists who are regularly imprisoned for various crimes relating to their exercise of free speech. Protests and demonstrations are also illegal. A spokesperson for Amnesty International stated, quote, beneath the progressive, glitzy image lie horrid stories of abuses and violations. The world will not be fooled by sham fanfare. Unfortunately, however, the world does largely seem to be fooled. Well, perhaps fooled is the wrong word, and it lets the most powerful people on the planet off the hook too easily. Fooled implies that they were tricked into believing that MBS has reformed the Saudi government and scaled back human rights abuses, and so now everything was fine and dandy, and the world can open back up for Saudi Arabia. There's nothing to indicate that any of the world leaders have been fooled. For example, according to the New York Times, quote, after Mr. Khashoggi Khashoggi's murder, some Western business executives and government officials backed out of Saudi Arabia's Global Investment Conference, including leaders of major American financial institutions. But by the following year, top deal makers were back at the event in Riyadh, the Saudi capital. And Tuesday night, following Trump's talks with MBS, Trump threw a lavish black-tie dinner at the White House for the Crown Prince. And the attendance list is indicative of just how willing the most powerful people in the world are to forgive MBS for the whole ordering the violent murder of a journalist and other human rights abuses thing. Water under the bridge, buddy. The New York Times did a good roundup of those in attendance and their ties to Saudi Arabia. There was Elon Musk, who attended as one of his first returns to the White House after his blow-up with Daddy Trump. Elon has accepted Saudi investment funds for Twitter as well as xAI, and xAI may be in talks with Saudi-backed AI company 𝗗𝗓𝗓 for future projects. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, was there. Apple has done deals worth upwards of $2 billion with Saudi Arabian companies. Michael Dell of Dell was there. Dell has gleefully partnered with Saudi Arabia, opening a fulfillment center there, and is exploring opportunities with Saudi state-owned oil company Aramco. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA was there. NVIDIA has already announced a partnership with Saudi Arabian AI company 𝗗𝗓𝗓𝗓. Huang actually traveled with the President of the United States to Saudi Arabia back in May. Lisa Su, CEO of AMD, another major computer chip company, was also in attendance and is also in cahoots with the Saudi AI company. Mike Wirth, CEO of Chevron, which has extensive ties with Saudi Arabia and its oil, was there. Jane Fraser, CEO of Citibank, was there. That bank is cozy with Saudi Arabia, and she's also co-chair of the U.S.-Saudi Business Council, which facilitates business ties between the countries. Steven Schwartzman, CEO of private equity firm Blackstone, was there because the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, where a lot of the riches produced from oil exportation is held, is deeply invested in private equity. And of course, Don Jr. was in attendance. He acted as liaison to the Gulf states during Trump's first presidential campaign, and he currently helps manage the Trump Organization, which has ties going back decades with Saudi Arabia, and those deals have only ramped up since Trump took office a second time. But of course, Trump Sr. has nothing to do with those deals. This is totally valid. There's no ethical concerns here. And then, of course, the specter of Jeffrey Epstein, which follows Trump wherever he goes, was also just floating over the lavish Rococo dinner at the White House last night. The full extent of Epstein's business ties with Saudi Arabia remain unknown, though the release of thousands of pages of messages last week indicated that Epstein also had a cozy relationship with MBS, who once gifted him a whole-ass Bedouin tent. Epstein had a picture of himself with MBS prominently displayed in his mansion in Manhattan. And so with all this information swirling in our brains, I want to just connect some dots here that highlight just how fucked this all is and put it in the context of, what we're discovering about Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that there are so many very powerful people willing to look the other way when atrocities are committed. Because what we have in common here between MBS and Trump and the abuses in Saudi Arabia and the people in attendance at last night's dinner, there are some through lines, okay? First of all, when journalists question Trump on Epstein and on Khashoggi, Trump has a very easy way of showing contempt that he uses to lash out at reporters, threatening to sue them or to strip their licenses, calling individual reporters piggy in front of everyone. And then kind of slyly glancing back at her to see her reaction. Did he get away with it? He did, mostly. While questioning two power-hungry megalomaniacs about the murder of a journalist, a fellow journalist is attacked and silenced.
And we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
There is no doubt in my mind that Trump admires MBS. He admires his strongman reputation. He admires how he gets away with atrocities relatively unscathed. He admires that he does whatever he wants and how he's convinced the world that he's not so bad, and he uses his ostentatious wealth to win back favor with anyone he wants. Those are the type of people Trump admires and aspires to be. And I imagine the admiration is mutual, despite the fact that I think most people in positions of power and authority with access to gobs of money around the world think that Trump is a fucking idiot. So that's one, through line I wanted to point out. Human rights abusers just hanging out and admiring other human rights abusers. Of course, the extent of human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia are very different from those in the United States under Trump, but I'm certain in many ways Trump sees Saudi Arabia as aspirational, okay? And then the other through line I wanted to point out is the connection between oil, because it's always about oil and the money that it produces, with tech and AI. The people in attendance at last night's dinner were there for a reason, because they know that Saudi Arabia is fucking drowning in oil money, and they want a piece of it. Saudi Arabia owns about 20% of the entire planet's known oil reserves. Aramco, the Saudi-owned oil company, is the most profitable company in the world, with earnings of nearly $200 billion over this last year. Saudi Aramco is followed closely by Alphabet, Google's parent company, Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia in earnings. What do you know? The only company that's managed to hold its own against the AI bubble is the Saudi-owned oil company, and that tells you a lot about the state of the world we are living in and why those people were in that room last night. Not only does the world rely on oil produced in the Middle East to literally run to power itself, it's also the money created by those oil sales that the major global companies are attempting to tap into. And MBS is happy to dangle that over their heads in order to get what he wants, and in order to get away with whatever human rights abuses he wants. And so even though Nvidia itself, for example, isn't in the market for crude oil, it sure as hell is interested in entering a market that crude oil has flushed with cash. And MBS is happy to oblige so long as it comes along with benefits for him and his rich friends in Saudi Arabia too, as well as these global leaders turning a blind eye to his human rights abuses. Hell, even Mr. Beast is trying to cash in on Saudi oil profits. He wasn't at the dinner last night at the White House, as far as I know, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge this fever dream of an advertisement I keep getting fed when I'm trying to just unwind and watch my programs at night. The advertisement is like if you took a Mr. Beast video off YouTube and ran it through AI, and out pops something so incoherent and flashy that you can't actually tell what the fuck's going on, but it looks like rides and games, and then Mr. Beast pops up like this weird giant, but still you have no idea what the hell is going on, and then it ends with a bunch of call-outs to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The first time I saw it, I was like, what the fuck is this fresh hell? Upon further inspection, it appears Mr. Beast, government name James Donaldson, age 27, has opened a theme park in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, in partnership with the government of Saudi Arabia, which includes the Beast Arena, where visitors can engage in the types of games and challenges made famous on Mr. Beast's YouTube channel. On the official Visit Saudi Instagram, Donaldson makes the announcement that the park opened November 13th, while also donning what appear to be a fresh set of the multi-millionaire special, veneers that are impossibly white and just a touch too large for the wearer's head. The end of the video once again features the sponsors of Beastland, which include the country of Saudi Arabia, as well as commercial partners like Dunkin' Donuts, Coca-Cola, and Domino's Pizza, among others. Watching the announcement generates a dystopic out-of-body experience, wherein the fourth wall of late-stage capitalism is broken, and for one gleaming moment you feel the true weight of the hell on earth that extractive, exploitative capitalism has wrought upon all of us. And that is indicative of a larger lesson from this MBS visit to the White House. When you take a step back from the fanfare and the centimillionaires and billionaires filling the newly gilded White House and all the pomp and circumstance and glitz and glamour, you have a Western country, a country in the global north, the United States, and the many billionaires it has produced, attempting to continue to extract wealth and resources from a country in the Middle East by whatever means necessary. Upwards of 40% of the entire Saudi Arabian economy is made up of oil exports. That level of dependence on a single export creates instability. It means that while MBS and his cronies get to live in lavish riches, Saudi Arabia is one of the most unequal countries in the world when it comes to wealth disparity. Only a few people at the top get to enjoy the riches created by oil extraction, and many at the bottom have to live with the consequences of environmental degradation, with poverty, with unemployment. This is the fate of countries the world over that have been exploited for their natural resources and left to rot when those resources ran out or the world discovered something new and shiny elsewhere. Dawn is an organization founded by the late Jamal Khashoggi to advocate for human rights in the Middle East. They recently published an article on MBS's visit to the White House saying, quote, "Those who casually describe Saudi Arabia as changing rarely explain what has actually improved. The right for women to drive, for instance, was not a generous gift from the ruler, but the outcome of years of struggle and sacrifice by activists who endured exile, imprisonment, travel bans, and torture. After the ban was lifted, many of those same women were detained and abused. Likewise, the regime's highly publicized social openness, concerts, festivals, and public events, serve mainly to whitewash repression, not to expand freedoms. If entertainment and cultural expansion were truly the objectives, they would be accompanied by political and civil reforms. Instead, citizens remain unable to question government decisions, criticize spending, or discuss the realities of unemployment, inflation, and growing poverty among the working class. Quote, indeed, the so-called progressive leaders' reception in Washington has advanced only through such repression. Saudi Arabia is now enduring its harshest era of crackdowns, executions, and censorship. Executions have reached record levels, even as state media once celebrated promises to limit the death penalty. Claims that arrests have declined ignore the grim reality that no activists remain free to be detained. Nearly all have been silenced or have been forced to flee the country. That is the reality on the ground in Saudi Arabia, while MBS and the richest people on the planet are wined and dined at the White House. And the reality is that everyone in that room knows, to some extent, that human rights abuses are happening in Saudi Arabia. They know that ample evidence exists to show that MBS probably ordered Khashoggi's killing. They know that Trump wishes to be an MBS-like strongman here at home. They know that their dollars will go towards supporting a violent, oppressive regime, both in the US and in Saudi Arabia, and they do not care. It's not about awareness or telling them like, hey, do you know where your dollars are going? They don't care. They never have and they never will. And I think that's important to say because there were many years, many decades, frankly, especially after World War II here and in Europe, including well into my own lifetime, where the general public at large was lulled into believing that major corporations and their leaders operated from a place of at least disinterested benevolence. That except for, whichever major oil producers implicated in the latest spill or when court cases brought forth evidence of horrific abuse or wide-scale environmental contamination, aside from those isolated incidents, there was a belief that a lot of corporations really bought into those corporate social responsibility programs and those diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, that women and minorities really mattered to them and that they cared about ethics, that they really did want to save the Amazon and ethically source their products and packaging, that they genuinely believed that their products could change the world for the better, that they really thought their employees were part of just one big family. Not everyone bought into that narrative, of course, but I think with COVID and with Trump and with the AI bubble and with the growing wealth inequality happening around the world and in our own country, that facade has been completely torn away. It is apparent to, I think, most of us, most of the general public, that profits are always the sole motivator. Profits over people always. And it has become very apparent, especially now that the second Trump administration has given them permission to drop the DEI facade and say how they really feel, that not only do these companies not care, there's a palpable disdain for the rest of us. As private businesses have been allowed to get away with harmful practices, as worker protections have been stripped away, as monopolization has run rampant, it has become clearer and clearer how much they fucking hate all of us. And they are getting more and more comfortable with being very blatant with their disdain. They fucking hate paying their workers any more than they are forced to. They will get cutthroat the second there are murmurs of unionization. They will cut DEI programs and benefits the first second they are able to. They will lay off as many humans as possible in favor of AI that delivers worse products and services. They fucking hate their workers, but they also fucking hate all of us, their consumers as well. They will bump up prices at the first opportunity to as high as they can possibly go. They will cut back on quality and cut corners wherever possible. They will lace shit with as many toxins as they can get away with if it means fewer steps for them and greater profits. Like, at least, in the 90s and prior to that, these companies at least tried to make it seem like they gave a shit about us. Like, think of Starbucks. In the 90s, it was like the archetype of a business that really did a good job at seeming to give a shit about both its workers and its consumers, attempting to create an inviting atmosphere, making baristas feel like members of a team, and people really bought into that shit. Like, it was bullshit then, just like it is now, but people really believed it. And I haven't been into a Starbucks in a long time, but they are fucking hellholes now. Like, no one enjoys being inside a Starbucks because it's clearly meant to be an experience that happens as quickly as possible at the lowest expense possible for the company and highest expense possible for the customers. Businesses get away with giving us crappier and crappier experiences and lower quality products for higher and higher prices because they can. because the government that needs to step in and regulate against monopolization, labor abuses, price fixing, and other issues has been completely overrun with the very business people who benefit from the lack of regulations. And I know we've gone a bit into a tangent, but this does relate to MBS's visit because it is a symptom of a larger issue wherein we have major tech giants and oil magnates scheming in public about how to fuck all of us over in order to enrich themselves further. How can new businesses come in and exploit Saudi Arabia for its resources for cheap labor? How can MBS further control and abuse his citizens and accrue military might in his region? Everything, all of this, all of geopolitical bullshit, all of politics, internal and external, it is all a game being played by a small group of elite individuals who stand to gain even more money than any one human could ever spend in a lifetime. And the will of the people has absolutely fucking jack shit to do with any of it. And this isn't new with the Trump regime. Some of the abuses happening here on the ground are new. The feeling of instability certainly is new. But Biden was also quick to skip on over to Saudi Arabia if it suited the geopolitical interests of wealthy leaders and the business owners who own them. And I think it's important that we see that for what it is. Similarly to how we had been successfully lulled for many decades into believing that some businesses and wealthy philanthropists really do give a shit about the rest of us, we have also been lulled into thinking that this country is run by politicians who give a shit about us too. Because we live in a democracy. What an amazing thing. A government by and for the people. We the people of the United States. All men are created equal. But in reality, democracy has always been conditional to the whims of the ruling class. The extent to which they are willing to allow democracy completely dictates how this country functions. And they will always put profits over people. Always. They will always show allegiance first and foremost to their class. Period, full stop. And this has always been true, but I feel like COVID has compounded with this second Trump administration to really strip away that veneer for a lot of us, myself included. I truly feel like I've been radicalized, especially in the last 11 months of this regime, and I think that that's apparent in the content that I've been making. I grew up thinking, George Bush is the worst and Obama is here to save us. I was absolutely lulled from a young age into feeling hope that it was through electoral politics and inspiring politicians like Obama and the two-party system that the working class would find salvation. But that has never been the case, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House. In politics, everything is a calculated power move, and power and democracy are never freely given unless first the people demand it, and then the people in power figure out how they can co-opt it and spin it into something that benefits them, either by giving a small concession in order to lull the people back into compliance, or by somehow managing to capitalize on the message for themselves. In part, this is kind of the reality of doing politics. Everyone has to compromise in order to make a system where millions of people exist, function. Sometimes giving a concession in order to lull people into compliance is just a way to manage a state with many people with competing desires. How do we create equilibrium so that people have a general sense of stability? And I think that that worked for a lot of people, white people mostly, for many decades. But the extent of the wealth stratification we are now experiencing makes it impossible to believe any sense of benevolence or policy made for the common good could ever come out of this government. Even if a Democrat takes power in 2028 and somehow manages to undo the destruction of the Trump administration, it will be very difficult to convince the electorate now that anyone in Washington gives two fucks about any of us out here, unless and until we manage to get money out of our politics, because money will always corrupt the system and has always corrupted the system. And given how deeply entrenched the wealthy elite are in our politics in both parties, given how much power they have through sheer concentration of resources, I sincerely don't see a way in which the people would ever be put first again in this system, because we don't matter to them. And in fact, we are an inconvenience to them. And that's all I could think about while looking at this gaudy White House dinner for MBS last night. And the reality is that we do have to continue living in a society that has a government that does politics. So I think we have a civic obligation to continue to tune into politics, to try to vote for people who actually might represent us. But it's also important to rely, once again, I know I'm a broken record, to rely on our communities, to find our voice and our power outside of the mainstream political system. They aren't going to save us. We have to save us. And we do so through building community and relying on each other. And if you'd like to support my work, consider joining here on YouTube by clicking the big join button below, or supporting me over on Patreon, patreon.com/LeejaMiller, where you get access to all these episodes completely ad-free. Thank you to my multi-platinum patrons, Mark, Sarah Shelby, Art, David, Latranger Lucas, Thomas Johnson, and Tay. Your generosity makes this channel what it is, so thank you. And if you like this episode, you'll like the one from Monday about the Epstein files. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.